Coming to paperback and e-readers from SJS Direct, Isis, House of Isis, the goddess next door takes on a hustling Hotep high priestess in Harlem in this Afrocentric Isis series adventure. Pre-order Isis, House of Isis on Amazon.com today. I was watching a That Umbrella Guy video, and he was talking about how SJWs are always complaining about the lack of diversity in comic books. However, when publishers like Marvel make efforts to add diversity to comic books, none of these SJWs can be found to purchase them. And this is something I have personal experience with as a publisher myself. Now, as a publisher myself, I have had numerous run-ins with SJWs like your pro-blacks and your hoteps in the black community. And oftentimes these people, when they will sit there and they will complain on Facebook groups about the lack of African American superheroes. And when I would go out here and I would present an image or a link to an ISIS series book, what they would do is say that this character looks like a white woman or is too light-skinned, and this was their reason not to go out here and buy this African American fantasy book from an African American creator. So I understand a lot of the frustration many comic fans have regarding these SJWs and what they do and what they're complaining in the comic book industry, because these guys will sit here and what they will do when you present them with an African American character like I did with Isis is what they will do is they will try to talk you into a circular argument. And in that circular argument, what they will do is try to pick apart your character, pick apart the character story, and try to find excuses not to go out here and buy that product. That's what I ran into on the regular oftentimes when I would try to promote the ISIS character on some African American fantasy Facebook groups, and sometimes when I would go to pro-black Facebook groups, these people would try to find excuses not to support the product. Now, many others who like African American fantasy would point out that the ISIS character is black, and they would point out how I made references to African American culture in the books, but these hoteps and these pro-blacks, they always look for an excuse not to buy any of my work. And we at Marvel are running into the same thing with these SJWs. And when you deal with these SJWs, oftentimes a lot of these people are just making a lot of noise, and they really don't want to go out here and buy anything. What they really want to do is get a whole lot of attention for themselves and keep getting attention from you, and keep the argument going is the only way they can get attention for themselves. That's the only reason why they go out here screaming and yelling and making all these complaints, because if they were really serious about having more diversity in the comic book industry, they wouldn't be complaining about the characters, because when you take a critical look at Marvel Comics' catalog, it truly is a rich and diverse universe filled with characters of all races and in the pages of Marvel Comics. Where there's really a lack of diversity is behind the scenes, because we don't have that many African American comic book writers or comic book artists behind the scenes. And if these social justice warriors were really serious about things, they would be serious about trying to get more qualified people behind the scenes so that we could have more people working in the comic book industry, and the comic book industry could have diversity really where it needs to be, which is in the artist pool, the writer pool, and the talent pool, where there's always been a bit of a shortage. But the social justice warriors really do not want to facilitate any sort of change, and they don't really want to take any sort of serious and constructive action towards helping make the comic book industry a better place. When it comes down to the social justice warrior, again, it's all about the attention they can get for themselves and their so-called righteous political cause, which is really a self-righteous political cause, because when we take a look at many of the comics that many of these SJWs produce, they are of poor quality. And when we take a look at the audience of SJWs, they never come out to support the very same products they say that they're so passionate about. These people say that they're so passionate about having these rich and so-called diverse characters, but when it's time to go actually spend money on those comics, we don't see any of these SJWs ever spend a dime on these comics in the same way that your Douglas Ernst, your Diversity in Comics, your Captain Cummings, and Yellow Flash have spent their money on these comics. They spend their money on those comics because even though they're roasting them, they understand how important spending that money is to keeping the comic book industry afloat. Because they understand that 90% of all books fail, and even when these books are published, there has to be money going back to the publisher to keep them in business. No, the SJW does not see publishing as a business, and they don't understand that every book that does poorly often hurts a publisher, and that often puts the publisher on the brink of going out of business. Because if you do not have 10% of books that sell to pay for the 90% of books that don't sell, what happens is the publisher will become insolvent. But that doesn't matter to the SJW because it's all about their so-called political cause. A political cause we clearly see they aren't passionate about. Because if they were so passionate about these so-called SJW books, they would be at the comic book store buying them on the regular. They would be in that comic book store when those books pop up and buying them in the same way many of the guys who roast these comics do, because these guys go out here and buy these comics because they love the comic book industry and they want to see the comic book industry get past this dark period. But the SJW doesn't want to see the comic book industry get past this dark period. What they want to do is use their whining and moaning to help the comic book industry fall into itself and then move on to the next cause where they will make people miserable in their company. Because when I look at these SJWs, it's not about helping an industry grow by expanding its audience. It's all about a place for them to get attention for themselves with their whining, moaning, and drama. Now, as a publisher who has had experience dealing with these SJWs, I have learned to tune out these SJWs and deal with the customers who actually spend money on my publications. And I would urge any comic publisher out there to do the exact same thing. If these people are not spending money on the product or spending money on the regular on the product, then you have no real incentive to listen to those people, because these same people who complain about change and want change, they don't want to make any efforts to get change by spending money on the products that they say they want so badly. And I take a look at the numbers of companies like Marvel and IDW, and again, it's really sad to see those numbers fall to these levels because the editors there are still trying to appeal to an audience that just does not exist. These people, they make a lot of noise on social media, but they never open up their wallets to spend any money on the products they say they want so much. If you are so passionate about a product, you're going to be the first in line to go pick up that product. And if you're so passionate about a product, you're going to spread the word about that product. That's what comic fans do when they see great comics. They go out here and they're there at the comic shop on Wednesday ready to buy new comics. And after they read those comics, they're out here promoting those comics and giving it word of mouth on message boards, on YouTube and Facebook and other social media, because they want to move the needle as related to these comics and give a publisher incentive to get the word out about those books, like many are about Mr. Miracle and many other great comics that are out here. They're willing to go out here and push those comics because they want to see more readers pick up those comics so that the industry can continue to start moving forward in a positive direction and start reaching the next generation of readers. But SJWs, They don't want the next generation of readers to pick up comics. They want to use comics as a soapbox to push their far left ideas. And you can, if you want to do that, go ahead and do that, but take that over to a platform like CreateSpace with your own money. Don't use commercial characters like Spider-Man, Iron Man, Captain America, Superman, and many others to push your soapbox ideas. No, use your own characters and use your own money. That way you can understand what it means to take a serious loss on a book from a business perspective, because I know that firsthand from personal experience. I know what it means to put money into a book and then have it take a loss sometimes, and sometimes have a book literally where you put a whole bunch of money into it and not sell only a handful of copies. But your SJW, again, is a spoiled, entitled, privileged person who doesn't want to make any sort of effort towards doing that type of work, because for them, it's all about somebody else doing the work, somebody else fronting the cost, and then somebody else taking the loss while they sit there in their righteous indignation, complaining about a problem, but never making any serious efforts towards fixing what they consider to be a problem. When I look at the comic book industry, it is having hard times, and one of the reasons why it's having hard times is because it's trying to appeal to a group of people who aren't really an audience. An audience is a group of people who go out of their way, like many of the Goths did for my books Spinsterella and Spellbound, and share that book with other people. An audience spends money, and an audience builds word of mouth so that a book can find new readers and a new audience, and an audience has passion for the product. SJWs have no passion for comic books. They have no love for comic books. All they have is malice, and when it comes down to that malice, that's something we don't need in the comic book industry, and that's why I urge, again, publishers to go out of their way to start ignoring these SJWs and their rhetoric, because these people aren't spending any money, and that's the core reason why you should do like me and not spend any time listening to them. If you'd like to try some of my SJS Direct fantasy titles like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, The Temptation of John Haynes, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate $1 or more to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.